Or good morning to our English audience. This is one of our events that we organize for the English speakers, friends of our museum. I am very pleased to give to our English speakers a new face of our museum. This new exhibition, Jews in the 20th Italian century, that now is here in our museum since the last springs and will be here at the museum until the end of next January. And we invite everybody to join us and to visit our museum with its exhibition. This exhibition conclude the 7 years of the life of our museum and also the 2000 years of the history of the Italian Jews here in Italy. As somebody perhaps remind, we began on the 2017 the inauguration of our museum with an exhibition about the first 1,000 of Italian Jewish history here in Italy. And after we had an important exhibition focused on the Renaissance and the exhibition, the important exhibition about the ghettos. And right now we begin with the emancipation period until displaying to our audience the 20th century. This is made through two important curators that are Vittorio Bo and Mario Toscano. Vittorio Bo unfortunately couldn't join this event this evening due familiar issues. But we have with us Mario Toscano, that is a full professor of contemporary history at the Department of Political Sciences of Sapienza University in Roma. And he's been also the director, together with Renato Moro, of an history review, Mondo Contemporaneo, and he's published essays and volumes on the themes of the Italian history, anti-Semitism, and Italian Judaism on the 20th century. Together with him, as I told you, there is another curator that is Vittorio Bo, who is a very known publisher of science communicator, and he directed the Einaudi Publishing House and founded the Codice Edizioni House of publishing. He has created several exhibitions, and this was the director of the Festival of the Sciences in Roma. He has taught economics and cultural enterprise at several universities. Together with them, this evening, we have the journalist of the Repubblica newspaper, Marco Contini. He deals on foreign affairs, but he has also solid roots in Ferrara. He lives between Roma and Ferrara and belongs to a Jewish family. Just most of everybody of us dreams about the very known family of the Contini in Ferrara. Now I want, this event is organized together with the Friends of MEIS Association, whose head is Andrea Fiano, who is together with us, and I'm pleased to give him the floor and to introduce this event together with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amedeo. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening to others attending. Yes, I am here as the president of Friends of MEIS, the Friends of the Jewish Museum in Ferrara. We are a nonprofit based in New York, and our purpose, our goal is to support the activities and the programs of the museum, and I would say even the idea of the museum itself, the Museum of Italian Judaism. We want to promote the activities, support and promote the activities. So we've been working on this for quite a few years. And I guess today's event, the presentation of this big exhibition, is a perfect example of what we can do. There is certainly a lot of interest in the US, I would say North America, about Italian Jews. And everything that can help us to know more, understand more, be more informed is very helpful. And that's where we're here today. And I'm very thankful to the museum for having organized this event and for the participant and the speakers. We will move now to a trailer about the show itself, the exhibition itself, and then Marco Contini will start moderating the event. So thank you very much all for attending, and there will be plenty of opportunities, I hope, to do other things like this in the future.
I suppose it's my turn, Andrea?
Yes, it's right.
Yes,
You're right. Yes.
please, go ahead.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Marco Contini. As Amedeo already told you, I'm a journalist for the Italian newspaper La Repubblica. I deal with mostly with foreign affairs, but I am also, I live in between Rome and Ferrara. I am a Ferrarese and Ferrarese Jew, so I have a strong connection ever since its birth with the MEIS and its works. Now, if you bear with me, I will then, of course, have questions for the moderator, Mario Toscano. I will also have a little question for Andrea Fiano. But if you bear with me, I will just take a couple of minutes, to try and paint a little story about what this exhibit is all about. So imagine, take a young Jewish man from Padova. Padova it could be anywhere in Italy, of course, but I've just decided to make it Padova. Let's say that he was born in 1895. His last name is absolutely insignificant. His given name, however, may be important. Chances are that he's called either Umberto or Vittorio or Amedeo. Any of those names that are very Italian and that will show a strong connection with the Italian royal family. We are, as we say, he's born at the end of the 19th century. So these names will reflect the connection that Italian Jews had towards the Italian royal family, simply because it is the one moment in which they began to feel as citizens. They will have a strong connection to the Risorgimento, which was the political movement which led to the unification of Italy into an independent state, and that first in the history of Italy, recognized, or rather accepted, people of all religions and of all faiths into its ranks. So this man, we said he's born in 1895. In 1915, he turns 20 and he's drafted, and he goes to war against the Austrians to fight World War I. Somehow he manages to survive it, which is not at all obvious given the might and the enormity of the slaughter, which was World War I. He comes back, he goes back to his normal life. He's an adult, he's a war veteran, but just after the end of the war, he starts witnessing the turmoil of post-war Italy. First, there's a couple of years in between 1920 and 1922 of strong social and political unrest. And then, of course, in 1922, there is the fascist coup d'etat, and Mussolini takes power. At the time, Italian Jewry is actually relatively similar to the rest of the country. Some are diehard fascists, among Jews as well. Some are politically active in leftist movements, especially in the socialist movement. But the majority, as I say, exactly like the rest of the Italian population, pretty much adapt and adjust. You know, they stay there, look around, they accept it. In the first probably 10 years of the fascist movement, they go about their lives. Okay, yes, they have to become card holders of the fascist party, but that's not such a big deal for most of the population, unless you're really strongly anti-fascist. But otherwise, okay, you follow along, you tag along, and you go along with your life. Except for the fact that in 1938, of course, this guy, Umberto, Amedeo, or Vittorio, as he may be named, you choose, he's Jewish. And in 1938, all of a sudden, he finds himself completely marginalized by the implementation of Mussolini's racial laws. This is a very rude awakening. His children will not be allowed to go into public schools. He has to sell whatever assets he has if he owns a company, for instance, if he runs a company. He is kicked out of the university. If he's a teacher, a school teacher, he's kicked out. Whatever job he may have, he will either be banned from it or have enormous difficulties in being able to attend to it. So all of a sudden, he's a pariah. This, already is shocking in and of itself. And then, of course, not so many years later, the Shoah. First World War II erupts, and then the Shoah. And so he actually has to run for his life. Now, in this ideal character of ours, somehow he manages to survive that as well. You choose, maybe because he has gone into exile in Latin America, like many Italian Jews did in those years, or perhaps because he was hiding and saved into an Italian convent somewhere in Italy, or maybe he actually but in the second part of the war he joins the resistance and goes into fighting and takes part into the fighting against Nazi fascism. In any case, we arrive in 1945, and this our man, who's no longer that young, because by that time he's 50 years old. He is again, he's alive in a country which is again democratic, or actually for the very first time he's truly democratic. But he's traumatized. He's traumatized like anyone who would survive such an awful experience, and he tries to regain his footing in this new place. In the meantime, however, or rather in the meantime, right after that, the State of Israel is born. So that also makes, it is a huge breakthrough. Our man in particular, I imagine him as being a mild Zionist, enough to make him feel that this newborn country must be helped and defended, and that he has a strong attachment to it, but not enough to take this 50-year-old man and make him resettle again on the other side of the Mediterranean, in a place which is completely different. Is newborn, is difficult to live in, it's very poor. Let's not forget, now in our in present days, Israel is a very rich country, but back then it was very poor. So he stays in Italy and goes on and starts having to deal with a completely different panorama, so to speak. You know, he's in a country which recognizes his rights fully, where he still has to deal with some leftovers of anti-Semitism, of course, which you know, doesn't make his life impossible in any way, but it may put him in some kind of discomfort. And he has this connection with this newborn state, which is important to him, but not so much. He grows older and whatever, wherever life takes him. So I don't know if this sounds familiar at all. You know, this man or woman, of course, I've chosen a man because I'm male, but it could be a woman and it would be practically identical, is the main character of this exhibit. I think it would sound very familiar to us because it's a very generalized and generic history of a lot of people in our families, people we know. They could have been our grandfathers or our fathers, depending on what our age is, maybe our great-grandfather at the most, you know, but they are our family. And also, you know, I made him live through all of this. You know, I made him survive each traumatic event in this little short narration. But you know, sliding doors as they work. He could have died in World War I. He could have died in World War II. He could have gone to Israel, made the Aliyah, and died in the Independence War there. You know, and all of this, each and every possible variation of this character actually responds and belongs to an individual person or more than one individual person that we have met or heard of or even personally loved, for all we know. So this, you know, this is the makeup of our story today, of who we are now. So this leads to my first question to Mario. To set up an exhibit on anything that happened in the 20th century is a huge task. I imagine it being particularly difficult, almost the most difficult of tasks, because, of course, it's the one which is closest to us. It's the one that speaks to us all more than something 2, 3, 10, 20 centuries ago. And also, since we're talking about the 20th century and Judaism, it's particularly rich with events, okay, from emancipation, the rebirth of anti-Semitism from Dreyfus onwards to in all of our continent, in our homes, the Shoah, the birth of the State of Israel with all that meant also in reshuffling of families. And sentiments and feelings and everything else. So it's particularly rich with events, with public events. Also, since it is the 20th century, which is the century of mass communication, we have a tremendous amount of material. Photographs, books, movies, sound bites, direct knowledge, memories, anything, absolutely anything. So here comes my question. If you have to set up an exhibit on this, how do you select the material? How do you choose what is significant, what is important, and what can be discarded? To you.
Okay, thank you. Grazie.
Oh, thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It depends on where you are. Now, let me try and give you an answer. So, answer the interesting question from Marco Contini. Now, Marco, you have well, basically already highlighted the key topics of an entire century, and you also made an interesting reference to the stories of individuals, but also to the stories of many families. And this represents, if you will, the possible, maybe not the only possible interpretation of this story. Now, before getting into the thick of this issue, I feel the need, if you will, to give you some further information
First and foremost, really would like to thank all those who helped us put together this event. Now, in particular, really would like to thank the curator. Now, unfortunately, he's not with us tonight, Vittorio Bo. Now, with Vittorio, we've been working together, and Vittorio has played a crucial role in putting together some solutions which are so interesting. Now, of course, I do hope I will be able to talk about some of them. For example, a very special video that's been specially conceived for this exhibition. But also because together with Vittorio Bo, we also have architect Ravalli. Now, Mr. Ravalli put forward solutions which, in my opinion, are very interesting. And if you know the building of MEIS, well, this is what he's done to make sure the exhibition is, let's say, as user-friendly as possible. Now, let me go back to your question, which is also, surfaced in the general presentation. So the question is, how can we describe an entire century? Now, once again, Marco Contini has just, highlighted some of the most important points of this century. So how can we put all of this material into just one exhibition? Well, I think that the success of our effort, is not due to what we have done. If you will, I can give you just some possible interpretations, which is what we have used to try and give a comprehensive representation. Now, once again, back to the key choice, it concerns the initial question. So, why the entire 20th century, and if so, how? Well, I think that the key point here was to try not to select some of the many moments that have characterized the 20th century, so as to make sure that the meaning of the century could be understood. For example, throughout the last decades, there have been plenty of events and on these topics, but in our country, Italy, but also in many other countries, well, I'm sure, well, at least in the entire Western world, all of these initiatives concerned especially persecutions, and then the years of racial laws and the Shoah. But of course, we cannot isolate all of this. I mean, it's impossible to convey a message that would exclude all what has happened before and all what happened after, these special tragic events. If we had done that, we would have reduced the possibility to really, understand and assess and appreciate all of these events. So that was the first choice we made. And of course, I'm talking about the catalogue that was published, but also the exhibition. And by the way, the exhibition and the catalogue go hand in hand. So these two elements are really interconnected and intertwined. I will share with you a general, set of explanations, but then if I have enough time, I will be back with some details and highlights on the catalogue. Now, this story, having to do with the 20th century, comes in different sections. So they represent the organization, so the so-called internal pathway to follow in the exhibition. And in terms of the development of the exhibition, in terms of topics, but also times, all of this fits into the catalog. Now, we decided to have one single highlight. And the main highlight, well, considering, the huge quantity of the subjects, contained into your question, we identified all of this with a specific concept, which is citizenship. If you consider an itinerary, that of course starts from the 20th century. So as you said before, Risorgimento, and then it goes all the way to the, basically to the conclusion of the 20th century. Well, if you do this, you can see that this kind of condition, civil condition, if you will, is what really marks the change of the condition of the religious minority within the state. So from the emancipation from Carlo Alberto, though this was happening in 1848, and then we also had to recognize the equality of citizens, independent from their religion. And this is what we find in the so-called liberal period, and in particular with the Zanardelli Code that was passed in 1889, and then we have the Gentile reform at the beginning of the 1920s. Then we have a sort of a new recognition. Well, of course, I cannot give you too many details and insights on all of these topics, but we also have to consider what the government and the fascist regime does on the church, which is the Patti Lateranensis, or the Lateran deeds. So there are plenty of novelties and new developments that modify the condition of citizenship, which is what we reached during the liberal time. Now, once again, the pathway continues, and we have the new norms approved in 1938. Then we have the change of the condition, which is what you can find after September the 8th, 1943, with a very specific set of regulations which are approved by the Italian Social Republic from the practical but also from the theoretical points of view, because we sort of turn citizens into enemies and foreigners, which is the words used to describe citizens at that time. So this is what they decided to use to describe Jews. Then we have another long phase, which is a very strong reintegration and removal of the racial legislation, which is what starts happening until, well, actually from 1945, especially in 46 and 47, all the way to completing all of this long pathway after the Italian Constitutional Charter, with the application of Article number 8 of the Constitutional Charter that sort of re-establishes an equality condition of all peoples belonging to different religions. So sort of they sign a sort of an agreement with the central government. So once again, this is the final point of reference of this very complex itinerary. Now, of course, this itinerary has to be explained with insights and the documentation that you partly referred to. So again, if I have enough time, I'll go back to some details on the documentation. But by the way, the relationship is a three-tier level. So we have the civil society, we have the religious minority, and then we have the state or the central government. So this is a sort of a reference framework that, in my humble opinion, allowed us to sort of scan all the events of that century. Now, of course, unquestionably, inevitably, we had to make some choices. There's a selection that has to be done by the curators. And of course, you have to choose fundamental topics. Now, as for the framework, well, we managed to reach at the very end of the century, so the end of the 20th century, marked by two special events, which really express the big changes that have taken place meanwhile, and concerning, of course, the shift, if you will, from the 20th to the 21st century. So the so-called the new years of the new century, because in that case, there will be new situations. So let me share with you some information on the two very important developments. So the first one happened in 1999. So we decided to have the European Day of Jewish Culture. And as for the second event, in 2000, we have created the Day of Memory. Now, this day means institutionalizing memories. And I think that there's been a very important shift when it comes to the relationships between the three entities that I have just mentioned. Well, this is what happened. So in that historical period, what we see is a sort of a European opening. So this kind of progress also concerns Italy, with plenty of European societies. On the other side, we see an attempt, and this will bring about many consequences, but the attempt was to go back to the memories of the years of war, persecutions, and then racism and anti-Semitism inside, the national awareness, and once again, the beginning, if you will, of the European culture. Then, of course, you may want to continue this pathway because many other things happened later. So within this big framework, this big box, of course, we had to select plenty of materials because, we have plenty of documentations concerning their history. And this is a history made of individuals, but also families. But at the same time, this is a story of a collective movement, so a society that in different ways fully participated into the political, social, cultural, economic life of the Italian society throughout the entire century. So I think that from this very perspective, if we had the possibility, by the way, to share with you some pictures, which is what I'm going to do right now. Here we go. We do have some very important examples, and this belongs to many different fields or areas. I have the time to share with you just some, quotes, and this is what I want to do, just highlighting the role that was played. And you can see here plenty of pictures concerning, the world of art. And this is the role played by women in particular, in terms, first of all, of participating into the social life and the very first emancipation movements for women, from women that we had in Italy at the very beginning of the 20th century. But they also played a key role in terms of the contribution that they have given at a very, very high level that we appreciate a lot. In some cases, this level was very high on many different topics and subjects. This is what they have done in terms of art, with many different types of, items. It depends on, the school they belonged to, but also with many other activities. Okay, we can now remove this picture. Now, this is a picture from Raphael Fine. So, an artist, a woman, very famous, very important in the history of Italian art, not only for her Italian experience, because this is a multi-shape experience. So they have worked in many different fields. In some cases, there have been artists having a Jewish origin, but very active in the Italian culture. And as was the case in the last picture you've seen, they have worked on the religious topics, or let's say traditional topics. But in many other cases, all of this has been reinterpreted. And so that's we cannot forget the contribution of feminine art to memory as a topic, especially starting from the 1980s. So as for your first question, I'd like to stop here because, well, I would have, much more information and many more insights to share with you on many different topics of the exhibition. I hope I was able to give you, a very general, superficial answer, a very quick answer. And once again, don't hesitate to ask me other questions, so maybe you need other information or further insights. I hope I will be able to give you the right answers to your questions. Thank you.
I don't know if there are questions from whoever's listening. Of course, I have a couple more, but I would rather yield to anybody else rather than have myself speak. So if there's anybody who wants to intervene, please do so. Otherwise, I will. 5, 4.
Okay, I hope it works. So I have a question for Mario Toscani and the organizers of this meeting in general. I mean, there's a part of the exhibition that's dedicated to what happened after 1938, so Palestine, Latin America, United States, and France. So the exodus of intellectuals or families of Italian Jews. Well, not many. Sorry to interrupt Mario, because I mean we have out of 50,000 Italian Jews, around 15 to 20,000 left the country, more or less. Well, this is a little too many, yes. Now, well, if you take, the Latin American, Palestine, and the US, I thought it was around 20,000 now. Official statistics at that time say something like 6,000. Well, we also have to really understand what the starting number is anyway. But it's an important number, especially because, leaving your country. So migrating is not an easy thing. Starting your new life in another country is definitely complicated. And if you consider all of the, let's say, space available, I'm sure you know MEIS. So from this point of view, of course, we do have some problems in terms of, exodus or that have taken place in the 20th century. Well, we had 3, maybe 4. So now this is information that's given to us. Maybe there's one picture. You see the anti-fascists having a Jewish origin in the second half of the 1920s and the very beginning of the 1930s. And again, thanks to some examples, you can also see Italian Jews leaving the country, so migrating after the racial laws. And there's a reference to the fact that after the 8th of September, there will also be a partial, let's say, escape to Switzerland. And we also have some people staying in Italy. Now, I haven't, talked about this before, but you've seen, one of the pictures, one painting has been given to us from the Uffizi. So this one, Rudolf Levit. Well, he was a German painter, and he wandered in many different countries. So he had to leave Germany. Then this painter would be arrested in Florence in 1944 and brought to concentration camp. There's also an indication concerning the survivors. Okay, we can remove the picture. Back to the survivors of the Shoah. Now, they come to Italy at the very end of the war. Now, some of them also came here previously with Rudolf Levi, for example, Ferramonti. Now, they will be the real protagonists of the Alia Bethi. So the topic, is very important. Now, of course, every single subject may be, worth an entire exhibition. Now, let's say we managed to at least mention all of them.
I want to add to Giorgio that the last years we had a series of conferences about. Oh, sorry, but I hear also the Italiano. Wait a moment, because anyway, I wanted to say that last year we had a series of conferences.
Si è bloccato per la
This is about
connessione.
the exile issues, and we are going to publish about the exile people during the World War II. So yeah, there is just wait a couple of months and you will get an entire books about this argument.
speaking of exile, I went up, since, you know, I know this is being organized this meeting is being organized by the Friends of MEIS. So I was, you know, imagining that we would be speaking to at least to someone who lives and resides in the United States. I went to check online because just following my memory, I could come up with very few names about important Jewish Italian Americans, so to speak, or Jewish Italians who made it in the United States. And the list is particularly small, I must say. You know, the significant names that come up are Emilio Segre, the physicist, Fiorello LaGuardia, the well-known mayor of New York, Judge Guido Calabresi, who also happens to have connections in Ferrara, Salvatore Luria, the microbiologist, and not that many more. There are a few opera singers, a few novelists, but not all that much. So, and yet, I was thinking, you know, and this, of course, I say with a huge sense of familiar and individual pride, the Garden of the Finzi Contini is, after the Divine Comedy, after Primo Levi, and after more recently Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Saga, is the most translated and read Italian book in the United States. So what does this say, if anything, about the significance of the Italian Jewish community? And I'm asking this both to Mario Toscano as the curator of the exhibit, but also to Andrea Fiano, who kind of embodies the two sides that are brought together here. He's definitely an Italian Jew, but he's also very, very much American. He's been living there forever, and if I'm not mistaken, he's an American citizen as well. So are we that important? That's what I'm asking, to be quite honest. Or are we just looking at our belly button?
Or?
Are we just looking at our belly button? You know, thinking that we are very important, but maybe we're not. I'm asking.
I would defer to Mario to start. I certainly have a few things to say.
Well, I hope I have, you know, understood the various points and topics of your question. Let me start with a sort of a joke, if you will, that concerns the current times. Now, if you go to the exhibition and see all of the objects on display, there's a guide to Italian, Jewish Italy in English. So once again, this is being published for our friends from the United States. And I think this is an interesting point of view, something that happened especially well, during the very last years, recently, very recently. Here we go, Italy, Jewish travel guide. Now, there's a relationship with the United States, the importance they have played. I think we really have to go back to what happened between 1938 and 1939. So quite recently, there's been a sort of, you know, investigation, some you know, insights on these 2 years because they were so special. And we also have heard, well, important witnesses talking about what happened. Let me mention two very different characters The first one is Giuseppe Prezzolini, an Italian scholar who moved to the US. Very important person, a conservative. So he represented the arrival of people representing the Italian Jewish bourgeoisie. So in many cases, the Italian bourgeoisie, and not only Jewish. Well, they represented an absolute new development because the Italians that were known were, I mean, people coming from Italy, and then they migrated. I mean, they left for professional reasons. So there were just a few possibilities of dialogue, which is what Tullia Zevi told us in some, interesting reports. There were possibilities to create a dialogue because on the one side, these people arriving in 38 and 39, so they left the fascist Italy we had at that time, and in many cases, they had a negative vision, but also, if you will, a very anti-fascist activity. And, the Italian so-called professional migration flows, in many cases, of course, I cannot generalize, but fascism was, in their opinion, a regime, if you will, enhancing the value of Italians abroad. So once again, from this point of view, two completely different individuals, and in some places, especially in New York, this is what we offer to an American audience. Now, as for the numbers of this, migration waves, we don't have numbers. It's very difficult, I mean, to do the calculations, but we know that there were many of them if you consider the total number of migrants. So some of them participated in some anti-fascist organizations, for example, the Mazzini Society, or many other groups. And we also had many people participating in projects. They wanted to create an Italian legion. So a team of soldiers fighting with the Allies. And this is what de Gaulle from France had done with French individuals. There have been many other events all the way to the very beginning of the 1980s. Well, quite probably the idea was still very vague, very general of what they were for Americans, and especially for American Jews. So they really didn't know exactly what Italian Jews were. So there was a lack of knowledge, or a poor level of knowledge. And maybe this has changed a little bit, because there have been plenty of events and initiatives in the US. For example, scientific meetings, but as well as exhibitions and many other, art events. And of course, I'm sure that they have, helped to give some more information on these topics. Once again, I hope I was able to answer your question, and I hope I've given you some useful reference to the topic you have raised, because, I mean, you have to consider all of this entire, if you will, time frame together with, new developments. So if you consider a general, a framework of the situation, well, we can now give more information about, the initial story, making a difference with the American story.
Well, I will add a few things and a few words. First of all, we have among us, the participants, I saw the name of Andrew Viterbi. Andrew Viterbi is one of the most well-known names in Silicon Valley, and he's one of the Italians who left with the racial laws in 1938. So there are many more names, Marco, that the ones you mentioned, but besides the name and besides the size of the Italian Jewish presence or community, the Italian Jews are and were. I've been in New York for over 40 years. They are and were a sort of a mysterious object because they don't fit certainly the stereotype or the characteristics of the Italian American community, and they don't fit the characteristics of the Jewish community, which is primarily Ashkenazi of Ashkenazi origin. So there is a lot of interest, curiosity, interest, I think openness to understand more. And if you get into details, certainly when it concerns what concerns the Shoah, but even very different areas. Annalisa Di Nola, who's with us now, also in the US, also, I mean, actually an academic, I'm not, I'm a journalist, but mentions the big success of some Jewish authors, Italian authors of cookbooks. And in general, recently there have been many books about Italian Jewish cuisine published and others. So there is, I would say, an outsized interest for all Jewish Italian affairs. Not to mention, and that's a very serious issue for another conversation, that Italian Jews, for the most, are trying to explain that the image of Italiani brava gente, the good Italians during the war, is pretty wrong. And so we are there to show very often in a practical way during conferences and public events that it wasn't exactly this dreamy situation that many describe, Italians being nicer than all the other Europeans during those very dark years.
Thank you, Andrea. I just have to say one very small thing to kind of justify my the provocation, but it's a minuscule bit of personal history. In 1980, I was studying in high school in the United States, and my English teacher, who was a person of spectacular culture. I mean, she was very bright and very educated. And she knew I was Italian, of course. And one day she finds out, you know, I must have said something like, I'm Jewish. And she looks at me, you know, she had studied and was teaching us Shakespeare. So, you know, someone of a certain degree of knowledge. And she looks at me and says, Italian? Sorry, Jewish? I thought you were Italian. You know, as if the two things were mutually exclusive. Now, probably, being that she had studied Shakespeare, the last one she had ever heard of was The Merchant of Venice, or something to that extent. But the reason why I was asking this is, yes, because Italians are normally known or perceived as all Catholics, and all coming from one very specific branch of the human experience. So, this was just the reason why I have this feeling, sort of this minority complex of being Italian, Jewish, and American. I must also acknowledge that other people have mentioned very significant contributions, like Laura Caponfermi, Max Friedman, so the Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, Bruno Rossi, who was a physicist in the Manhattan Project. So yes, it is true. I mean, the names that I've mentioned were, or the list of the names that I mentioned was obviously very flawed. I don't know how long we want to go. We're passing the hour, so I don't know if Amedeo.
That's fine. Usually, after yes. Okay, of course.
Okay, may I just add one point? What Andrea has said is very important. I mean, when talking about this kind of distinction that has to be made, so the prevailing Ashkenazi, and on the other side, if you will, the diversity with the rest of the Italian migrants that I have referred to. Then you have this, huge component, a high-level, piece. For example, another very important person that we may add to those we mentioned is Emilio Segre. Just because I'm sticking to the same area. But of course, if you refer to the audience, many such individuals are sort of far away, distant, and in some cases it's really difficult to understand the pluralism of cultural or even religious identities that they represent. Okay, Amedeo, maybe I have interrupted you
That's
while
fine,
you...
Mario, because there is interest about by the audience, and so we can go on. But I think usually our events are about 1 hour, and we passed also the hours. I don't see any questions on the chat. Therefore, with the agreement of Marco, Andrea, and you, I would say that we wanted with this event to arouse the wishes of coming in Ferrara to see the ghetto, also the Jewish community, and specifically our museum. The exhibition will be on display until the beginning of February. Afterwards, we will have another exhibition devoted to Purim and the Megillot, and will come an important Megillah from the National Library from Jerusalem, made in Ferrara in the 17th century of the Rabbi Pescarol on next March.